Hello everyone, welcome to this video. Welcome to my data engineering YouTube channel. In this video, I have an exciting topic. It's about nulls in SQL. Yes, I know some of you probably hate nulls, some of you love it, but yes, let's take a deep dive on nulls, what it is, and how you can effectively write your code and it's gonna be bug free. If you are new to this channel, please drop a like, comment, subscribe, and share this video if you find it useful. Let's go. In this video, my goal is to first go over some big background about nulls. What are some of the rules of nulls? Then we're gonna go to the live demo and I'll show you step by step different ways nulls interact with your code, be it in a logical evaluation, in a logical operator, in a where clause, in a case statement, and an aggregate function. In addition to that, I'll give you some bonus gotchas and common mistakes people make while writing the code. From my experience, I've been writing SQL queries for over 8 years. And I can tell you, every once in a while, I get caught with some of these issues, and I'm giving it to you for free, so you don't make the same mistakes that even advanced programmers make once in a while. So what is null? First of all, you have to understand null just represents missing information. It means that the data doesn't exist in your database now or in that particular field. Now you could imagine you have a web form and users fill it out. Some fields are optional. If they don't enter anything, that's a missing information. When you save it in your database, it comes up as null. You see that? That's how it all makes sense. Now, and let's talk about some of the rules when we write the queries in our SQL. What are some of the things we should bear in mind? So null is the reason why we have a three-valued logic in relational database. So normally in other systems, we have true or false, but in relational database, we have true, false, or null. So that what does that mean? It means that any expression can evaluate to true, false, or unknown. And you have to be very mindful of this. Secondly, when you evaluate null against a condition and a logical operation, which I'll go into in more detail, it's always evaluates to unknown. It's neither true nor false. I hope you'll see that more in detail in the demo. Thirdly, where clauses in SQL only returns records that evaluate to true. Always bear that in mind, guys. Where clause always evaluates the records or returns records that evaluate to true. Now let's go into the demo. So first of all, let's talk about null propagation. What is null propagation? Null is when null is interacting with other literal values like strings, characters, numeric, integers, or numbers. How does null behave? Or how does SQL evaluate that entire expression? So I made a note here saying when null is combined to a value or a column, it always results to a null. Again, if you think of null as an unknown, if I multiply an unknown value to like a value 10, it's gonna be unknown because that unknown number could have been anything. So if it makes literal sense. If I run this statement 10 times null, it's always gonna be null. How about this one? Null divided by 0. Take a guess. Let's do it. It evaluates a null. A null. You know why? It does make sense, because if you divide a negative number by 0, if you go back to your math or calculus, it should return negative infinity, but it's a positive number, it should be positive infinity. So it is kind of unknown in that way, although like in SQL, you're always gonna get an error message. So they kept it like this. We're not gonna complain about that. Secondly, or thirdly, when you add it, you guessed it right. Null is always gonna return a null when you add it. Now, this one is a very common mistake people make. If you have a column or you have a string that you're trying to concatenate with a field that has null values, guess what will happen? For those particular records, they will evaluate to a null, because if you're having an unknown and trying to concatenate it to a known value, it's gonna make everything unknown. It does. If you want to interpret that null to be a missing or empty string, then you literally have to handle that in your code by using something like a coalesce. So it's very important when you write your code, first make sure that, is this field a nullable field? Is it not a nullable field? That way, when you write your code, even though, let's say on day 1, that field doesn't have any null values, but down the line, because that field, that column has it's a nullable, it doesn't have a not null constraint, that if you write your code, if you bear that in mind, you can prevent bugs, not now, but also in the future, because you already expected to handle those issues if they come up with your null handling. So this is very important for advanced programmers, that they catch this in their production code and make it safe. Now, thirdly, or second section is null in logical evaluations. So let's think about it. If you have a null field and you're trying to evaluate it against a literal value, nulls will always evaluate to unknown. It's very simple. If I say 1 is 1 greater than unknown, I don't know. Is 1 less than unknown? Is 1 equal to unknown? I don't know. So, but just to help you understand, 1 is equal to 1. So this is gonna be a true, right? If I run this, it's gonna be a false. 1 is not equal to 2. 1 is not equal to 1. So these are false, true, false. Now, if I start using nulls, it's gonna be unknown, because I don't know. I don't know if null is less than 10. I don't know. Is null not equal to hello? I don't know. Is 1 not equal to null? I don't know. Again, think about it, guys. It's very important. It's easy to maybe understand these ones. Yeah, 1, null is not equal, not if you're comparing null equal to 1 or null less than 10, yes, it makes sense. But the not equal is something that even till today, I forget that, because I think that, oh, yeah, 1 definitely is not equal to an unknown value. But no, you have to think about it like it's really an unknown. Like, it's not like null is not just a character called null. It's actually unknown. It could have been 1 inside that unknown. If you think of unknown as a black box, maybe it was 1 that was placed in at that moment. So the SQL query doesn't know if you say 1, is it not equal to null? It won't give you a false, because sometimes I think, sorry, it will give you a true, because I'll think, oh yeah, 1 is definitely not equal to unknown. You think it should be returning a true statement. No, it will return a unknown, because it doesn't know. It honestly doesn't know what the value is. So bear that in mind. Now, thirdly, section 3, null with Boolean operators. Now, in this case, think of null as unknown, like I stressed. But in this case, limit your scope to true or false, because those are the types of Booleans we have in SQL's or relational databases. Now, going back to recap of our fundamentals, when I have a true statement and a true Boolean, and I have an and is your multiplication, right? So true and true should return true. True and false should what? Return false, right? Because, yeah, false represents 0, and is a multiplier, so it's gonna return false. False and false, obviously, is false. True or false, because true is a 1 and or is a addition, so it's gonna be, you guess that right, true. True or true, obviously, is true. False or false, obviously, is false. So I think most people get hung up on these guys, the false or true. Sometimes they forget, and also the false and true. So if you have to go over this, go back to your fundamentals, revise this, bear that in mind. When you have a false and a true, what happens? What's the and mean? It's always gonna be false. If you have a false or true, it's always gonna be a true. So now, that aside, let's deal with the nulls. So if you have a null, and remember what I said, null is unknown, and it can either be, in this case, it can either be a true or false. So in this case, what's gonna happen? If a null and a true, if I say select null and a true, and this can either be true or false. So what do you think is gonna happen? It's gonna be unknown. Yes, it makes sense, right? Because if this was a true, then this whole thing should have returned a true. But if this was a false, then the whole thing would return a false. So it is not a fixed value, right? Like it could change the entire expression depending what this value really was. So that's how you should think about it. It's unknown. It can either be anyone. So the SQL doesn't know when it runs it together. Now let's try null and false. Again, pause the video, try to think about it. Go back, rewind the video, try to figure it out on yourself. Let's run it. It's a false. Why is that? It makes sense, right? It makes sense it's a false. Because anytime, even if it was a true, we have a true and a false, like we already saw. True, because it's an and this is a false, it's always gonna be false, right? Because again, you already know what how and is. It's a multiplier. False is a 0. Regardless, this is true. It's always gonna be false. And if it was a false, obviously it's false. So this, regardless of what the null is, it's always gonna be a false for the entire expression. That's why you get a false. Then if we have a null or true, guess what will happen? Is it true? It makes sense, right? Yes, because regardless of what this is, if it's a true or false, it doesn't matter. The true, because the true and the or, it's gonna add the 1 to that expression and evaluate to a true. Now, if you have a null or false, again, this is a little bit tricky. Pause the video, figure it out. Again, if it was a true, this whole thing would have been a true, but if it was a false, the whole thing would have been a false. So it's gonna be unknown. So try to understand this. If you understand this properly, the rest of this video will be super easy for you. So go back, rewind this video, go back to your fundamentals, understand this. It's a lifesaver. Now let's talk about some real examples. Some real examples here, real life examples. So I created a simple table. Please forgive me how simple it is. It's bare bone, simple. So we have a null value, 1 and a 2 in a 1 column. And that's the only column we have in that table. Very simple, guys. And now, a common rookie mistake, a very common rookie mistake. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this. New SQL developers, you tell them, oh, they're writing a query and they're like, oh, I just want to filter for the null. Oh, give me how many records I have in null in this column. You know what they do? They say where column equal to null. Now, going back to the fundamentals, it's not just about, oh, that's not how to write it. You should have used it's not. No, if you think about it, based on what we just learned so far, the where clause, it only picks up the records that are evaluated to true. And with what we learned so far as well, when we have an equality sign, or greater than, or less than, or like any logical operator sign, and we compare null to any value, even if it's another null or literal value, it's always gonna return a null. We dealt with this, guys, right? We dealt with this. Like, we already know this. I forgot this null. Null is equal to null. Like, we know this is null, right? It's always gonna return null. So if you understand that part, you should know that every single record, the evaluation for every single record in this data set will be null. So in that case, because where clause is returning only the true statement, we will never get any record back in this case. So it's a common rookie mistake. This is why it happens the same way, and this is not how to write it. So if you want to write it, you have to say is null. That way you're saying, is this field or record, is it unknown? Is null is the keyword here, not equals to. And that's what you do, and that's how you get your null value. If you want to get the negation, it's not null, you write the opposite, and you get it's not null. Now, let's talk about the next one. Be careful when you have filters for a column with a set of values that might have null. So that's the section we are trying to describe now. Now, in this case, imagine I have this. I have my first predicate where column 1 is equal to 1. I'm trying to filter for those values, which we know, like, yeah, it's gonna return 1 if I run just that part. But now, what if I add this part? I say, and also, again, look at this and. I'm using an and column 1. It could have been column 2 or column 3. If I had more columns in this table, I'm very lazy to create more columns in this table, but it could have been another column. And I said, and column 1 is equal to null. So what have we learned so far? When we write this query, we know that this is always gonna evaluate to unknown. But guess what? Sometimes this might evaluate to true, sometimes it might evaluate to false, depending on what the value in that particular record is for that column. Now, what we know about and. We know that and, this is, we know the rules already. You could go back to the earlier, rewind this video and know. But one thing you have to remember is the where clause, guys. The where clause only cares about the true. So sometimes we know that even with a null, yes, this whole entire thing can evaluate to a false, but we don't care about those records, because we only care about when it's true. And we know that if we have a true over here and an unknown, everything gonna be unknown. We already know that, right? Like, come on, we already know that. If we have a true and unknown, it's always gonna be unknown. So if you need to go back, rewind this video, do that. But that is how it works. And that's why we never get any record back. So be careful, guys. When you write anything and you put the equal to, that will always make you not return any records in that data set. Even though you might say, oh, but you should have returned these records. No, this will always make it, because of this null here, you're always gonna affect the entire where clause. Now, if we have an or, it behaves differently, right? Because what we went over, we know that or is an addition, and if it's this one, it just needs one of the sides to be true. If this is true, automatically you get some records back. And that's what is happening. Even though this evaluates to a null, because this is a true, you have your record for that column equal to 1. Now let's rewrite this same query and make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more realistic to what we see in the real world. So we use an in clause, same as that query like the above. All we do is we use an in clause, so we get the same result, nothing fancy. Now let's take it a bit further. Let's have a new table, and we have created this table, and that table we put 1 and null. The same thing with over here in the in clause. We put it in a smaller table, and we say, instead of explicitly mentioning those values, we decide to select it from that table using a subquery, which is something you probably will see in the real world, where you're trying to filter the data from one table using data from another table. And this has some nulls in it. When you run it, you get the record you expect. Yeah, because this, you're filtering for where column 1 has 1. Notice that you don't get the null though, right? Because see, like I say, this table has nulls inside it, right? It has 1 and null. So don't get confused that you're not getting the null record, because we already know this will never help you get the null values. No, if you really want to get the null values, you have to say is null. You can't use equal to null, because this evaluates to unknown. It doesn't evaluate to true, and we know where clause only picks up the true records. So I hope that makes sense, and that's why when you run this, you only get record 1. Now that is fine. You know, most people, that's what they expect to get without even thinking about it. But here's where it gets very tricky, and I see a lot of mistakes in the real world. When you say you want to get the opposite, you want to get the records that are not in this, like from this table, that are not in this your subquery, and you run it. Let's run it. See what happens. I don't get any record. Why? No, you're like, what's going on? You look at it and you're like, whoa, I have null 1 and 2. I should get the 2 value, right? Because that is not in the subquery, right? But that's not how it works, guys, right? Because if you go back to the fundamentals, I can rewrite this same not inquiry like this. I can write it like this, right? This is not in 1 and null. And to take it a step further, I can also write it like this. Because if I expand this out, if I go from the not in and expand it out, it's nothing but saying column 1 not equal to 1 and column 1 not equal to null. If you don't know how I got from not in to this expansion of the same query, Then you need to, again, go back to your negation and fundamentals, or take my bootcamp class coming soon on SQL on how to negate your predicates. And in this case, assume this is the same, even if you don't understand it. Now, you can see that the column 1, if we say column 1 not equal to 1, fine. Give me the records where column 1 is not equal to 1. I will get the value 2, right? Which is not an issue. However, when I put this column 1 is not equal to null, guess what happens? Again, you going back to the fundamentals. When this column is, this always gonna evaluate to a null. And what did we say about and null and where clause only caring about returning the true statement? Immediately we have this combination. This always gonna be an unknown, and because this is unknown and this is an and, it doesn't matter what this evaluates, true or false, the entire expression becomes unknown, right? Because not really always unknown, but it always evaluates either a false or unknown, right? Because if this was a true and here it was unknown, it's unknown. If this was a false, it's gonna be a false. But we don't care for falses, we only care about the true. So we will never get any record back. And this is very common, guys, in the SQL code that we have in a lot of companies. They don't remember when you have a subquery that, and you're doing a not in, if that field is nullable, you may not have the issue on that first day, because yes, you don't have the issue because other fields are having the value. But one day someone makes a mistake, or you have some bad data flows into your system and that field has a null, you stop getting results on your target, and you start wondering what happened. The pipeline ran, the jobs ran, all succeeded, but I don't get any data back in my report. What's going on? You start scratching your head. This is exactly what's going on. I hope you understand the deep deep dive on why exactly it's happening and what you can do to prevent this from happening. So what we can do to prevent this from happening is, if you are writing a not in clause and you have a subquery, always make sure that if that field is, say, nullable field, you better put your is not null to protect yourself from having midnight crisis. And here you run this and you get the correct value too. Now the third section is your null in a case condition and if statement. Now if you have this case, in this case we have in a case statement, it's very simple. The case goes to evaluate the first true condition, then goes for the next or the else block, if there's a next block. So therefore, the else block may be executed in a null or false condition from the first evaluation. So this is a very simple thing, but it's a little bit, I wanted to mention it because so you can understand the internals of how your logic is working. So if I have a case 1 equal to null, we already know this will be evaluated to a null. It's not a false, it's a null. However, even though it's an unknown evaluation, it will go back into the else block. It doesn't just say, oh, it's unknown, error out. No, it still goes to the else, because that's how it works in case. It only cares if it's a true, it's gonna pick the first one. But if it's like I said here, if it's a null or false, it goes to the else block or the second block. And that is why you get the second. And same thing applies here. Anytime we evaluate, we have a false, it doesn't do this. Here it's a null, it doesn't do this, so it goes to the third. Now let's talk about the aggregate functions. So this another place that a lot of people get hung up on. You have a table like we already saw. You have the null 1 and 2, and you do a count. Yeah, you do a count star, you get a tree. You do count column, maybe somebody says, oh, I want to count the column. I don't like doing count star. And they're getting a record 2. They're like, why? Why do I get a 2? But in the table, I got a count of 3. Yes, because that's how SQL works. It filters out the null field when it does aggregate function. That's something you have to bear in mind, right? Bear in mind that it filters out the null field. It does not operate on null field. So you have that in mind. And when you do a sum, same thing. It only sums the fields that are not null. It doesn't throw an error. It doesn't try to change the null field to a 0 or something like that. It just filters it out. And same thing with average. It's giving a 1.5. You should understand it as average of a column is the same as saying the sum of the column divided by the count of the column. It's not count star, like you could see here. Because if it was count star, you should have gotten a 1 in the average. But we get a 1.5 because the count is using the count of the column. And that is why we get the result. So it's something just to bear in mind. Now, when we talk about handling nulls in an expression, you have different functions depending on the relational database you're using. I use Coalesce because it's ANSYS SQL. It works with Spark, Oracle, SQL Server, PostgreSQL, anything. And I love it. It picks the first non-null record or value, and it displays that. So that when you run this is what it gets. If you see the null, it's gonna replace it with a 0. If there's a not null field, it takes the not null field. And that's how you handle nulls. So finally, I will give you a real world bug that I faced. This is very recent. That's why I kind of got motivated to make this video. I was having a simple good old merge statement where the goal in our pipeline was to refresh the data from the source, using the source to update the target table. So like, merge statement, when the values didn't match based on the primary key, he does an insert. When the values match, the different thing is we are not blindly updating all the records with the values from the source. However, we update it only when we notice that there is a change in the actual fields that we care about. So in this case, I have the target product name and the price. And to do this, I say, if the target product name is not equal to the source product name, or the target price is not equal to the source price, do the update. And that's exactly what we did here. Is to, when this evaluates to true for those records, it's gonna do the update. If everything is exactly the same, it's not gonna do the update on those records. So this is why we have this. However, one thing happened. One of the records that I was looking at, it was reported as a bug that it was not getting updated. So what was happening was, in the target table, all the fields were null. The product name was null, the price was null, and in the source, it has the latest values. It has some values. So I was wondering, why is it not updating? Because I thought that null is obviously not equal to the source product name. or any field that has a value. So I was like, why? But it turns out that I had to go back to the fundamentals. Null is unknown. So if unknown compares is not unknown is not equal to a known value, right? Because you don't know. It may or may not be. So if you really want to check that unknown field, you have to use a coalesce to either replace that field with a literal value, or you have to use the is null to explicitly check this field is a null. So to fix this code, I had to add extra conditions to say if the target field is null, just blindly update those fields. Because at that point, I didn't want to take a chance where some fields have a null in the target and the source has values and I'm not updating them. So anytime it sees records that are null in the target, it's gonna try to update it for those records. So this is the fix that I had to do to get the pipeline to update correctly across the table whenever there's a value. So this is pretty much the end of the video. It's the end of this deep dive on SQL Nulls. I will put in the video description this notebook for your reference. I'll upload it to my GitHub. And in addition, I'll drop the reference of the Wikipedia page that I use for this video. It's very detailed. If you want, you could, I'm sure you could go even to more deep resources. But I hope that you really learned a lot and you really would apply this in your real world use cases to make sure that you have very high quality code going into the future where you're handling nulls properly or anticipating the effects of nulls when you write your code. Again, please like, subscribe to this YouTube channel, share this if you find it helpful. I really appreciate every single one of you and have a wonderful day. Bye.